Jungkook's world shatters when he uncovers Jimin's painful secret sacrifice. Loyalty, betrayal, and heartbreak collide behind HYBE's closed doors. "Why is your name on the resignation letter, Jimin?" The paper trembled in Jungkook's grip, the corners damp from his sweat. The silence that followed was thick and unbearable. Jimin didn't flinch. His eyes, those familiar, bright eyes, were now quiet, hollow, like a song stripped of its melody. Outside the frosted glass walls of HYBE's 11th floor conference room, the world went on as usual. Assistants rushed, doors opened and closed, and somewhere, music played faintly from a rehearsal room. But inside, time felt frozen. Jungkook had arrived late to the emergency board meeting, unaware that his name had been dragged into a corporate scandal involving breach of contract and confidential data leaks. It wasn't until he found Jimin alone in that unmarked room, no cameras, no witnesses, that the truth began to crack open like a wound. "I signed it before they could call you in," Jimin finally said, his voice quiet, almost inaudible over the distant hum of the ventilation. "You... what?" Jungkook's voice rose, fraying with disbelief. Why would you take the fall for me?" Jimin closed his eyes, the flicker of guilt betraying his usual calm. His hand reached for the thermos he always brought, the one filled with barley tea he brewed himself every morning. It was a nervous habit, something Jungkook had once teased him about. Now, it felt unbearably distant. "They found the file on your drive. Someone planted it, but HYBE didn't care to look deeper. I couldn't let them. You couldn't let them ruin me." Jungkook finished, sinking into the leather chair, his legs suddenly weak. It was impossible. Jimin had always been the steady one, the one who took the late-night calls from management, who knew every backup plan, who held the team together even when everyone else frayed. Jungkook, by contrast, was brilliant but impulsive, his emotions often louder than his reason. Still, this was something else. This was career-ending, life-altering. Jungkook's chest tightened as the reality began to settle in. "You'll lose everything. You knew that." Jimin nodded, eyes now meeting Jungkook's with a look so raw it was hard to bear. "You still have dreams to chase. I've already lived mine." Outside, a distant buzz from the elevator signaled someone approaching. The footsteps, sharp, deliberate, grew louder. Likely, a HYBE executive coming to finalize the paperwork. The resignation letter was still on the table, Jimin's signature already inked. "You don't get to decide that," Jungkook whispered, barely containing the tremor in his voice. "You don't get to disappear." There was a storm in Jungkook's head, memories crashing one after another. The first time they sang together at a tiny showcase. Jimin pulling him out of bed during his depressive days. The way Jimin always noticed when he was overworking, sliding vitamin packs into his hoodie pocket like it was nothing. And now this. "I thought I was protecting you," Jimin said, voice cracking. "But maybe I just didn't want you to hate me." Jungkook's brow furrowed. "Why would I ever?" "Because I knew who really sent that file." The door burst open. Taehyung stood there, breathless, eyes darting between the two of them. He looked like he had run all the way from the basement rehearsal hall. "You both need to leave," he hissed. "Now. Something's wrong. They're not just after you anymore." The fluorescent lights flickered, and for the first time in years, Jungkook saw fear on Jimin's face. "Don't ask questions. Just move," Taehyung snapped, his voice lower now but no less urgent. He yanked open the emergency stairwell door and gestured frantically. "If they see you here, it's over." Jungkook looked back at Jimin, who hadn't moved. Still seated, still frozen, still gripping that thermos like it was the only solid thing left in his world. "You heard him," Jungkook said, his voice breaking with panic and disbelief. "Come on, we'll figure it out." "But not here." Jimin hesitated for one more second, then stood slowly, stiffly, like a man walking into the cold after being asleep too long. He moved wordlessly toward the stairwell, his expression unreadable. Taehyung didn't wait for either of them. He was already 2 floors down before they'd even made it out of the 11th. The stairwell smelled of industrial paint and recycled air. Footsteps echoed like gunshots. Jungkook's heart pounded louder than his breathing. He had no idea what was happening anymore, only that something was deeply, dangerously wrong. "Where are we going?" Jungkook demanded once they reached the 8th floor, gripping the railing to slow down. Taehyung turned his head, jaw tight. "I overheard the legal team. They're not just covering it up anymore. They want to make an example. HYBE is leaking the story themselves." "Internal sabotage," Betrayal from inside the group. It's a narrative they can spin. Public sympathy goes to the company. Not you. Not Jimin. What? Jungkook's voice cracked. They wouldn't. They can't. They already are, Taehyung said grimly. They're framing it as a national security breach. Ties to foreign entities. Fabricated, maybe, but it won't matter. They just need the public scared and angry and not asking real questions. This is insane, Jungkook whispered, hands shaking. This is the industry, Jimin muttered, almost to himself. They stopped at the 5th floor. Taehyung kicked open the service door to the east hallway, a part of the building. Jungkook hadn't been in for years. Storage rooms, disused practice spaces, old archives, no cameras, no windows. They ducked into a small room with mirrored walls and a stack of unused chairs in the corner. The air smelled of dust and cold vinyl. Okay, Taehyung exhaled, locking the door behind them. We have maybe 15 minutes before they realize you're not in your scheduled interview upstairs. I bought us some time by faking a system crash, but it won't last. Jimin sat against the mirrored wall, his reflection a ghost of himself. Jungkook stood in the middle of the room, breathing hard. I don't get it, Jungkook said, voice cracking. Why go this far? Why throw Jimin under the bus? Why me? What the hell did we do? You didn't do anything, Taehyung said. That's exactly why it works. Jungkook stared at him. They needed someone perfect, untouchable. You've always been the golden one, Jungkook. No scandals, no dirt. Everyone loves you. So when the golden one falls, people watch. People believe. It becomes a spectacle. And Jimin? Jungkook whispered. They think he's expendable, Taehyung said darkly. A little too clean. A little too quiet. And loyal to a fault. Jungkook turned to Jimin, who had said nothing. His silence was worse than any outburst. Tell me you didn't know, Jungkook said quietly. Tell me you didn't see this coming. Jimin finally looked up, eyes red but dry. I saw it coming a year ago, he said. Right after your solo debut hit #1 on the US charts. Everything changed. Meetings got colder. Security got tighter. They started pulling me aside for random check-ins. At first, I thought it was just stress. But then they stopped copying me on production notes. I started seeing documents with your name on it that I'd never approved. You should have told me, Jungkook said, his voice nearly breaking. You should have told me. I thought I could handle it, Jimin said, his tone brittle. I didn't want to burden you. You were flying. I wasn't going to be the weight that dragged you down. God, Jimin, Jungkook choked. You were never the weight. You were the only reason I stayed grounded. For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the distant hum of the building's central heating. Then Jimin stood up. He turned toward the mirror, then turned away from it again, like he couldn't bear to look at himself. There's something else, he said. Something I never told you. Jungkook froze. What do you mean? Jimin took a breath. The file they planted. It wasn't just old demos or contracts. It was voice memos, personal ones, yours, from years ago. Stuff you recorded after your father died. When you were breaking down, remember? Jungkook's blood turned to ice. How did they? I don't know. I don't know how they got them. But I think that's the real leverage. They were going to leak them. Use them to spin a narrative. K-pop star collapses under pressure. Betrays company to cope with grief. Something like that. Jesus Christ, Jungkook whispered, stumbling back. That's sick. That's fucking sick. Exactly, Taehyung said, watching the door nervously. That's why we need to go public first. Take control of the narrative before they do. And say what? Jimin asked bitterly. That our own label is trying to destroy us? Who's going to believe that? No one wants to believe the machine is broken. They just want the music. They'll believe us if we have proof, Taehyung said. And I know who has it. The room went still. Taehyung pulled out his phone and tapped through a series of encrypted apps. Then he showed them a photo. Blurry, low resolution, but unmistakable. Bang PD. Talking to someone in a private airport lounge. The man across from him had his face turned away, but the posture was familiar. Namjoon, Jungkook stepped back like he'd been slapped. No, that doesn't make sense. I'm not saying he's behind it, Taehyung said, but he knows more than he's letting on. He's been working with the legal team quietly, and ever since he started branching into corporate strategy, No, Jungkook said again, shaking his head violently. He wouldn't. Not to us. Not to you. But even as he said it, he remembered the distance. The way Namjoon had stopped returning calls. The way his answers in group chats had gotten shorter. The last few times they saw each other in person, something had been off. We have to confront him, Jimin said suddenly. If he's part of this, or even just knows who is, we need answers. Tonight, you won't get a meeting that fast, Taehyung warned. Then we don't ask for one, Jimin said. We find him. Jungkook looked between them, still stunned, still trying to process. Are we seriously doing this? He asked. Going rogue against the company that made us? Jimin's expression was calm, resolute. No, he said. We're going rogue against the people who used us. They waited until nightfall. By then, the HYBE building had emptied of most employees. Security rotated in predictable shifts. Taehyung still had an old clearance card from his time as creative lead on an internal campaign. It was risky, but their best chance. They slipped into the executive suite using the freight elevator, bypassing the main lobby. It smelled of cedar wood and polished concrete. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. Namjoon's office was dark, but the light under the door of the adjoining conference room was on. Jimin reached for the handle. Wait, Jungkook whispered. What if we're wrong? Jimin looked over his shoulder, eyes shadowed but steady. Then I'll take the fall again, alone. But when the door opened, none of them were prepared for what they saw. Namjoon wasn't alone. He sat at the far end of the conference table, flanked by two figures in suits. In front of him were sealed documents, a burner phone, and a monitor showing CCTV footage from earlier that day, footage that had never been shown to them before. Close the door, Namjoon said calmly without looking up. We need to talk. And everything they thought they knew shattered in an instant. You shouldn't be here, Namjoon said without lifting his gaze from the screen. His voice was colder than they remembered, stripped of the warmth that had once guided them like a lighthouse in chaos. The room, dimly lit by the monitors and a soft overhead fixture, reeked of tension and something darker, like power disguised as diplomacy. Jungkook's fingers curled into fists at his sides. Jimin said nothing. Taehyung's eyes darted between the suited men at the table and the monitor showing paused footage, grainy, time-stamped video of Jungkook inside the studio where the file was supposedly leaked. That studio had been locked. He remembered clearly. He hadn't even been in the building that day. How the hell did you get that footage? Jungkook asked, voice sharp and rising. Namjoon looked up then, the way a professor might glance at an unruly student, not angry, not disappointed, just resigned. That's not the question you should be asking. Jimin stepped forward, voice low but burning. Then tell us, what is the right question, Hyung? Namjoon sighed. The question is, who gave them access to your biometrics, Jungkook? The room fell into a vacuum of silence. What are you saying? Taehyung demanded. I'm saying someone within our own circle authorized the override on the building's security that day, Namjoon said. Facial recognition, vocal ID, retina scan. The system thought it was you, Jungkook. That's impossible, Jungkook snapped. I've never given permission, and you know that footage is faked, deep-faked or something. It's not a deep fake. One of the men in suits interjected for the first time. We ran it through proprietary forensic software. It's a composite, yes, but the metadata is buried within the system itself, not external. Someone inside the company did this. Namjoon leaned back, hands steepled under his chin. Someone who had access to the original biometrics, to the internal security archives. Someone who had access to all of us. Jimin inhaled sharply. You're talking about Min Yoongi. For the first time, Namjoon's facade cracked. A flicker of grief, or maybe guilt, passed over his face. We don't know for sure, he said quietly. But he went dark 5 months ago. No contact, no response to the label. And the last time I saw him, he said something strange. What did he say? Jungkook asked. Namjoon looked at him. He said, they're gonna use you as the fire and me as the smoke. But you won't see the match until it's already lit. Taehyung let out a breath like a curse. That sounds like him. Why didn't you tell us this earlier? Jimin asked, stepping closer to the table now, his voice trembling not with fear, but with fury. You've known we were being hunted for weeks, maybe months. And instead of warning us, you let it happen? I was trying to stop it, Namjoon said, the weight of his guilt evident now. But it's bigger than HYBE, bigger than the industry. This is about control, global leverage. Music is just the facade. Jungkook's voice shook as he spoke. You're saying we're part of somewhat political strategy, like we're pawns? We always were, Namjoon said softly. The silence cracked with the sound of Jungkook slamming his palm on the table. No, I didn't give up my childhood, my freedom, my life, just to be a pawn in some faceless game. Namjoon stood now, slowly, deliberately. His gaze didn't waver. Then it's time you stop playing and start fighting. The men in suits exchanged glances. One slid a folder across the table toward Jungkook. He hesitated, then picked it up and opened it. Inside were photos grainy surveillance image, redacted document, transfer logs, and then, near the bottom, a photo of Jimin at a coffee shop, smiling, laughing, with someone they all knew. A woman. Jungkook stared, his lips parted slightly, unable to form words. He recognized her. She had been part of their digital content team years ago. Quiet, efficient, always watching. She was your handler, Jimin, Namjoon said, his tone neither accusatory nor sympathetic. She monitored you, guided your media perception, reported on your behavior. You were one of the control variables in their experiment. I trusted her, Jimin whispered, his voice breaking. They made sure of that, Namjoon interrupted. They designed everything to make you trust her, and it worked. Jimin stepped back like he'd been punched. His breath was shaky now, his eyes unfocused. Taehyung reached for his shoulder, but Jimin shook him off. How much of my life was scripted? He asked no one. Was the depression real? Was the recovery real? Or was I just moving on cue? You were always real, Jungkook said, stepping in, voice taut with emotion. Everything about you was real. Don't let them take that away from you. But they already have, Jimin said, his voice cracking. That's the thing. They didn't need to fake anything. Just nudge it, shape it, frame it, like clay. I let it happen, Namjoon said quietly. I saw the early drafts of this program, years ago. It started as a way to predict market trends, but it became predictive behavior modeling, emotional influence campaigns, audience conditioning through parasocial intimacy. They tested it on influencers. Then idol groups. And you didn't stop it? Jungkook said, disgusted. I tried, Namjoon said. But you don't stop a machine like this. You survive it. Or you dismantle it from the inside. Taehyung spoke now, quiet but firm. So that's why you joined the board? Namjoon nodded. But it wasn't enough. They outmaneuvered me. I'm not even sure I'll be here tomorrow. So if you're going to do something, do it now. A heavy knock interrupted the moment. 3 slow bangs on the outer glass door. Security. Namjoon moved quickly, shutting down the monitors, hiding the files. Through the side corridor. It leads to the west stairwell. Don't talk. Don't run. Just walk. But Jimin didn't move. He stared at the folder in Jungkook's hand, then back at Namjoon. If we leave now, he said quietly, we'll spend the rest of our lives running. And if you stay? Namjoon asked. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Then we fight. Security knocked again harder now. Taehyung pushed open the side door. We can't stay here. Jimin turned to Jungkook. If you want out, say it. I won't ask you again. Jungkook didn't hesitate. I'm not going anywhere without you. Namjoon smiled faintly, almost with regret. Then God help you both. They disappeared into the shadows as the main door burst open behind them. And somewhere in the building, a fire alarm began to wail, not by accident, but triggered. Not a warning, but a signal. The match had been lit. The fire alarm's scream bled into the corridors like a war cry, its shrill rhythm pounding through the concrete skeleton of the HYBE building. Red emergency lights stuttered against the walls, painting every surface with a pulsing glow that made everything feel unreal, like they'd stepped into a hallucination. Jungkook's breath rasped in his throat as he followed Taehyung down the narrow stairwell. Jimin was close behind, silent, his face locked into a mask of restraint that looked ready to crack at any moment. Each footstep was a drumbeat, Each floor they descended a countdown towards something they couldn't name. At the bottom of the stairs, behind an unmarked door, lay a corridor that few in the company knew even existed. It had once been part of a private storage wing used for archiving unreleased footage and prototype tech. But somewhere along the way, it had become something else, an internal black site. HYBE's digital catacombs. Taehyung slid an old keycard across the reader. It hesitated, then blinked green. The door opened with a hiss, revealing a long hallway of frosted glass doors, security panels, and rows of sealed cabinets humming softly with electricity. A soft mechanical whir undercut the silence, like servers thinking in the dark. Jungkook hesitated. "Why here?" "Because this," Taehyung said, walking forward, "is where all the ghosts live." Jimin's gaze snapped toward him. "This is the archive," Taehyung explained. "Not the public one. The real one. The one with the footage that never made it to air. The audio logs, the personality files." Jungkook blinked. "Personality files? They've been collecting data on us for years. Not just performance metrics or social media analytics. Behavioral models, psychological profiles. Everything you ever said in a green room, in a hallway, to a manager, they logged it. And then they fed it into their systems. For what?" Jimin demanded, his voice raw. Taehyung turned, the flickering red light casting strange shadows across his face. "To predict us, to manipulate us, to own us." Jungkook felt like the floor had tilted under him. He stepped forward, suddenly cold. "You mean to say they've been running simulations of us? What fake versions? Digital doubles?" "More than that," Taehyung said. "They've used our patterns to train generative AI to ghostwrite content songs, interviews, even fan interactions. And every time we agreed to a new promotional clause or app integration, we gave them more of ourselves." Jimin stared at the black glass cabinet beside him. A flicker of light pulsed inside rows of tiny hard drives stacked like blood cells. "They turned us into algorithms," Taehyung nodded. "That's why they can make you leak, something you never touched. Because in their system, they own your reaction before you even have it." Jungkook's voice broke. "So we're not even people to them. We're, what, tools? Puppets?" "Worse," Taehyung said, unlocking a smaller side room. "We're products." The room beyond was small, cramped, filled with desks covered in tangled wires, VR headsets, and prototype wearables. Against the far wall, a single screen flickered to life as Taehyung entered a passcode. A logo appeared clean, minimalistic. Clinical. Project Celestia. Behavioral Emotional Loop Engine System for Idle Talent Integration Augmentation. Beneath it, 2 images loaded. Jungkook and Jimin. Not photos. Models. Digital avatars rendered in terrifying detail. Their expressions changed automatically in response to the background data. Smiling, frowning, laughing, crying. Controlled by sliders on the left panel like emotion was just a variable to be tweaked. Jimin stepped back, visibly shaking.
"They were playing us like instruments."
Jungkook turned to Taehyung. "How long have you known about this?" Taehyung's jaw clenched. 6 months. After I stepped down from the fashion collab, I started digging. That's why I never re-signed the solo deal. They wanted to run me through the same process. I got lucky. Someone tipped me off. "Who?" Jimin asked. Taehyung hesitated. Before he could answer, a dull thunk echoed through the hallway outside. Footsteps. Jungkook immediately lunged for the screen and yanked the power cord free. Taehyung grabbed a bag and began stuffing drives and loose files inside. Jimin killed the overhead lights, plunging them into half-darkness. The door creaked open. A flashlight beam swept across the floor. "Don't move," said a voice, low and sharp. Then a figure stepped into the room. Not a guard. Hoseo. Jungkook froze. HYBE? Hoseok lowered the flashlight slowly. His eyes were tired, rimmed red, like he hadn't slept in days. He looked older somehow. Not aged, but hardened. "I've been looking for you," he said. Taehyung narrowed his eyes. "You working for them?" "No," Hoseok said, voice gravelly. "I'm trying to end this, just like you." "Prove it," Jimin said. His body half-tensed like he was ready to strike. Hoseok reached into his jacket and slowly produced a cracked flash drive. "This has the original voice memos. Jungkook's real ones, unaltered. I pulled them before the system could overwrite the metadata. Jungkook took it with shaking hands. Why? He asked, eyes wet. Why would you risk that? Hoseok's smile was faint. Because I remember who we were, and I'm not going to let that be rewritten. Behind them, the hallway echoed again. This time, it wasn't a lone pair of footsteps. It was many. Go, Hoseok said, turning to face the hallway. There's a service tunnel through the south storage. It leads out under the old press wing. I'll hold them. Jimin looked at him, eyes pleading. Don't do this alone. I already am, Hoseok said with a sad smile. It's all right. Jungkook didn't want to move, but Taehyung grabbed his wrist. Now, we still have a chance. They ran, through metal corridors and forgotten tunnels, past boxes of old merch and moth-eaten costumes. They passed a wall covered in photos, Polaroids of fan meets, candid shots, childhood memories immortalized in still frames. Jimin stopped for a second at one particular photo. All 7 of them, smiling. Before the tours, before the chaos, before everything fractured. He didn't take it. He just looked. When they finally emerged into the night, the city was a blur of rain and neon. Sirens wailed in the distance. Somewhere behind them, in that monolith of a building, a legacy was burning from the inside. Jungkook stood in the alley, soaked, gasping, clutching the flash drive like it was his last anchor to reality. What do we do now? He asked, breathless. Jimin looked at him, then he looked at the skyline. We tell the world, he said, but we don't tell them what they expect. We don't scream, we show. We let them see the truth, let them feel it. And if they don't believe us? Taehyung asked. Jimin turned, eyes dark with fire. Then we become louder than their lies. And the rain fell. But it could not put out the match that had already ignited a revolution. The rain didn't stop. It poured like the sky itself had decided to grieve, drowning the city in a curtain of water and shadow. Neon lights flickered across puddles, casting distorted reflections of faces they no longer trusted. Jungkook, Jimin, and Taehyung ducked into an abandoned studio on the far west side of Seoul, an old training space used in the early years of HYBE. Before success grew teeth, the air inside was stale. The smell of rotting floor foam and forgotten sweat clung to every surface. Dust clung to the walls like memories left to decay. The mirrors were cracked in places, the ceiling lights blinking with dying breath. Jungkook collapsed onto the floor, back against the wall, soaked to the bone. The flash drive in his hand felt heavier than anything he'd ever held, heavier than a trophy, heavier than a microphone, heavier than the weight of his name. He stared at it. This little thing could ruin everything, he muttered. Or save it, Taehyung said from the opposite corner, wringing water out of his hoodie. Jimin stood in front of the shattered mirror, staring at his own reflection in silence. It had been hours since they escaped. Hoseok's fate remained unknown. Namjoon had gone dark, and HYBE would retaliate soon. That much was certain. We need to listen to them, Jimin finally said. Jungkook looked up. What? The voice memos, he said, eyes still on the mirror. We need to know what they were going to use against you, what they heard. Taehyung opened his mouth to protest, but Jungkook nodded slowly. His fingers trembled as he plugged the flash drive into the beat-up laptop Taehyung had managed to salvage from an old locker. The screen blinked to life with a groan, the loading bar crawling across the screen like it hated its purpose. Then a folder appeared, labeled JK, Vox, Frag, 2019, 2022, secured. There were over 50 files. Jimin came to sit beside him. No one spoke as Jungkook clicked the first one. A soft hiss, then a familiar voice, his own, but younger, more fragile, filled with a pain he didn't remember recording. I don't think I know who I am without them, without the group, without him. The room went completely still. The next file. I wish someone would ask me how I really feel. Not for content, not for the fans, just once, just for me. Another. I lied to Jimin today. Told him I was fine. I don't know why. I just couldn't let him see me like this. Not again. Jungkook's throat tightened. He looked at Jimin, but Jimin didn't move. He just stared at the screen, his hands clenched. They listened to another, and another. Each was more devastating than the last raw confessions. Recorded alone in practice rooms, late at night, back when Jungkook thought no one would ever hear them. Moments of doubt, guilt, loneliness. Some had his voice cracking. Others sounded distant, almost dissociative. They were never meant to be heard. And yet HYBE had cataloged them, archived them, weaponized them. I don't want to be the golden boy anymore, the final clip said. I just want to be enough. When it ended, silence crashed over the room. Like a tidal wave, Taehyung stood up and walked to the window, pressing his forehead to the foggy glass. Jimin said nothing. His breathing was shallow, face pale. Jungkook finally broke. I feel sick. They were going to use that to paint you as unstable, Taehyung said without turning. Spin the story that you leaked files in a mental breakdown, that you betrayed the company because you couldn't handle the pressure. They knew exactly how to manipulate the narrative, Jimin said, voice rough. They knew which words to extract, which emotions to distort. Jungkook stared at his reflection in the laptop screen. What if they're right? He whispered. Jimin looked at him alarmed. What are you talking about? What if I did break? Jungkook said, voice rising. What if somewhere in all this, I lost who I was? Maybe I'm not the golden boy. Maybe I never was. Maybe I was just their product. No, Jimin said, firm now. Don't do that. Don't let them turn your pain into their truth. You are not what they recorded. You're more than those moments. Jungkook turned to him, eyes glistening. Then why didn't I see it coming? Why didn't I feel it happening? Because they were brilliant at hiding it, Taehyung said softly. That's the whole point. They didn't destroy us with fire. They chipped away at us with silence. There was a long pause. Then Jungkook asked the question none of them wanted to say out loud. What do we do with this? Jimin looked down at the drive. His hands flexed. We release it. You mean all of it? Taehyung asked. Yes, Jimin said. Unedited, unfiltered, every second of it. That'll destroy Jungkook, Taehyung said, turning sharply. You know how the media will twist it, how the fans will react. It's not just the company we're exposing, it's him. Jimin met Jungkook's gaze. And Jungkook, to their surprise, nodded. Let them see me, the real me. If I'm going to fall, I want it to be me falling, not their version of me. You're sure? Jimin asked. I have to be. They sat together in silence for a long moment, letting the weight of that decision settle. Outside, the rain was finally slowing. Taehyung sighed. All right, but if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. We can't just upload it and hope it goes viral. We need strategy, distribution, encryption. We need someone who can move it without it being traced back to us. Jimin narrowed his eyes. I know someone. Taehyung raised an eyebrow. Who? Jimin hesitated, then spoke. Yoongi. Jungkook's mouth fell open. We don't even know where he is. I do, Jimin said. How? Jimin looked away. Because he never left me. What does that even mean? Taehyung asked, confused. Jimin walked over to his bag and pulled out a black phone, a model no longer in production. This was given to me 6 months ago. No name, no instructions, just a text. One line. When it all burns, call me. He powered it on. The battery icon blinked to life. No passcode. Just a single contact, S. Unknown. They all stared at the screen. Call him, Jungkook said. Jimin pressed the icon. It rang once. Then a voice, unmistakable and calm. Are you finally ready? Yoongijungkook, Jimin said, voice tight. We need your help. I know, Yoongi said. I've been watching. You've done better than I expected. But it's time for you to disappear. What? Jungkook said sharply. Yoongi continued. If you want to survive what's coming next, you have to let the old versions of yourselves die. The Jungkook they idolize. The Jimin they romanticize. The Taehyung they think they understand. Burn them all. Only the truth lives now. And what happens after that? Jimin asked. Yoongi's voice was a whisper. Then we rebuild. But this time, on our terms. The call ended. The rain stopped. And deep beneath the surface of a city built on illusion, 3 ghosts decided to come back to life this time. Not as idols, but as truth. The war had begun. The train station was almost empty by dawn. The kind of emptiness that didn't feel peaceful but rather ominous, like the world was holding its breath. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a sterile hue on the tile floor. Jimin sat alone on the bench, hood up, sunglasses on, tapping his foot rhythmically as he waited for the next train to Gwangju, the place Yoongi had told him to go in a message that self-deleted the moment it appeared. Jungkook and Taehyung had left hours earlier, taking separate routes, burner phones in their pockets, backpacks filled with only what they needed. The drives, fake IDs, and a printed copy of the internal memo that showed HYBE's strategic approval of Project Celestia. Everything else, names, titles, awards, fame, had been left behind like broken armor. The train pulled in with a metallic shriek. Jimin didn't move for a second. He looked down at his hands. They were steady now, not shaking like they used to before shows. Not trembling like they had when he signed that resignation letter. Just steady, cold, ready. He boarded. The city blurred into mountains as the train carved its way into the countryside. Hours passed. Jimin barely blinked. He played Yoongi's voice over in his mind again and again. Let the old versions of yourselves die. But what if the old versions wanted to live? What if they still screamed inside his chest, begging for the stage lights, the fans, the cheers, the illusion? He pressed his head to the cold glass. No answers came. When he arrived at the location, a remote cabin surrounded by trees that looked like they'd been there for centuries, he wasn't surprised that the door was unlocked. He stepped inside. Dim lighting, the smell of coffee, and soldered electronics. Yoongi stood in the center of the room, back turned, hunched over a desk littered with laptops, circuit boards, and memory cards. "You're late," he said. Jimin closed the door behind him. The train was slow. Yoongi finally turned. He looked thinner, older, not broken, never that, but worn, like a knife that had been sharpened too many times and finally accepted its edge came at a cost. Jimin didn't hug him. He wanted to, but the distance between them had been carved too deep. And they both knew why. "You disappeared," Jimin said. "I had to," Yoongi replied. "If I'd stayed, they would have used me like they tried to use you. But worse, because I built half of this system. I understood it. That made me dangerous. You could have told us." And said what? Yoongi's voice rose, sharp now. That the label we bled for was cloning our personalities into predictive algorithms? That our smiles were being used to manipulate the emotions of millions? That our healing was pre-scripted like a drama special? Jimin didn't respond. Yoongi sighed and gestured toward a chair. "Sit. We don't have much time." Jimin took the seat across from him. Yoongi slid a tablet across the table, already loaded with files. "What is this?" Jimin asked. "Proof," Yoongi said, "that Celestia wasn't just internal. They licensed fragments of your identities to third-party companies, marketing firms, advertising agencies, government-linked AI labs. You're not just a product in-house anymore. You're a commodity." Jimin's jaw tensed. "That's illegal." "Not if they own the contracts," Yoongi replied. "And you signed yours. That was 10 years ago," Jimin spat. "We were kids. We didn't know what half of it meant." "Doesn't matter now," Yoongi said. "What matters is this." He pulled up a screen showing a countdown. "They're going public with their own version of the leak. Tomorrow, at 11 a.m. Jimin's heart dropped. "Tomorrow?" Yoongi nodded. "They'll release an internal report claiming the files were manipulated by a foreign entity, that you, Jimin Park, acted under coercion. They'll throw in some charity donations you made to organizations abroad. Call it suspicious. Tie it to political sentiment. Wrap the scandal in nationalism. It's a classic page out of the propaganda playbook." Jimin's hands curled into fists. "And Jungkook?" he asked. Yoongi hesitated. "They'll say he had a psychological breakdown, that he lashed out under pressure. They'll release some of the voice memos, edited to make him sound dangerous, unstable. He's the tragic genius. You're the traitor. And Taehyung?" Yoongi paused. "They won't touch him, not directly. But they'll go after his family, his father's connections, rumors, innuendo. They'll turn the public against him without ever naming him." Jimin closed his eyes. It was too much. And yet, not enough to stop. "What do we do?" he asked. Yoongi leaned forward, intensity flickering in his eyes. "We release everything. But not just data. We go emotional, cinematic, personal. We build a mirror so precise they can't deny their own reflection in it." Jimin stared at him. "You're talking about a documentary." "More than that," Yoongi said. "A live stream, unedited. You, Jungkook, Taehyung, sitting together, talking, showing the raw files, reading the contracts, playing the voice memos, real time, no cuts. Let the public see your truth before they feed them the company's lie. They'll try to shut it down." "They will," Yoongi said. "Which is why We don't stream from Korea. Jimin blinked. Where then? Yoongi pulled out a hard drive. Busan. There's an old server node there that isn't directly linked to the national grid. I had it rerouted through a shell VPN system 6 months ago. It's off book. Government can't track it unless they know what they're looking for. And who else knows? No one, Yoongi said. Not even Hoseok. The name hit hard. Jimin swallowed. Is he alive? I don't know, Yoongi admitted. Last trace pinged from somewhere near the Han River. After that, nothing. Either he escaped or he made sure we did. Jimin lowered his gaze. He deserved better. We all did, Yoongi said. But there's no time to mourn. Only time to finish this. That night, Jimin messaged Jungkook and Taehyung with the plan. They would meet in Busan in 24 hours. Yoongi would handle the stream setup. Jimin would prepare the materials. Jungkook would speak. And Taehyung would sing. At first, Taehyung resisted. Why me? He texted. Why should I give them a song now? Jimin responded with one line. Because music is the only thing they haven't corrupted. Taehyung didn't reply, but the next morning, he arrived in Busan with a guitar. The setup was makeshift. Cables ran across the floor like veins. The backdrop was raw, just an old wooden wall painted black, with a single camera mounted to a tripod Yoongi had salvaged from a tech dump. They sat down together, Jungkook, Jimin, Taehyung, facing the camera. No makeup, no filters, no stylists. Just them. Jungkook looked at the lens. He took a breath and began. My name is Jungkook. I was manufactured, trained, celebrated, worshipped, and almost destroyed. But I'm not here to cry. I'm here to speak. Jimin followed. I'm Park Jimin. I was loyal. I believed in the system. I protected it even when it turned on us. I wanted to believe they loved us the way we loved them. But love isn't supposed to hurt this much. Taehyung looked into the camera, silent for a moment, then said simply, I'm Kim Taehyung, and I'm not afraid anymore. The stream began, and within minutes, it caught fire. Millions tuned in. Fans, journalists, former idols, executives, people who had always suspected but never had proof. The comment feed exploded. The platform barely held. They showed the files, the contracts, the voice memos. Jungkook read them himself. His voice shook. He cried. But he didn't stop. Jimin played clips from the AI model. Taehyung played the song, a soft, aching melody with lyrics that bled. You called us angels while you clipped our wings, danced in the fire, but never heard us sing. Now the silence breaks with every scar we bring, and the truth will never fade in the spring. The stream ended after 4 hours, and for the first time in their lives, they didn't wait for applause. They just said, get exposed, free. The silence that followed was not empty. It was electric. A storm was coming, but this time, they were ready to stand in the center of it. The sun never really rose the next day. It pushed itself above the horizon reluctantly, veiled behind thick gray clouds that refused to part, casting Busan in an overcast shroud that mirrored the mood of the entire nation. The storm hadn't just come, it had shattered the sky. By the time Jimin, Jungkook, and Taehyung left the makeshift stream room, the internet was already a wildfire. They didn't make it far from the building before their burner phones exploded with messages, some supportive, some skeptical, some threatening. The truth was out now, but the world wasn't ready for it. Not completely. The first call came from an unknown number. Jungkook answered. He regretted it immediately. This is Director Han from HYBE Legal Affairs, said a cold voice on the other end. Mr. Jeon, I'm advising you now that you have committed multiple federal crimes by exposing classified internal documentation and violating non-disclosure clauses in your contract. Good morning to you too, Jungkook said, voice hoarse from the night before. This isn't a joke, Han snapped. You've started something you can't control. This will go to court. Your bank accounts are frozen, and your name has been flagged by the Ministry of Culture. You're under surveillance. Then I hope you're watching closely, Jungkook said and hung up. Jimin stared at him. What did they say? They're scared. But it didn't take long for the consequences to move beyond phone calls. Within hours, every major news outlet in South Korea had picked up the story. Most kept a neutral tone, idle whistleblowers, shake industry with secret files. But some were venomous. One article called them fallen icons. Another accused them of staging the stream for attention. Paid bots flooded social media, sowing doubt, misquoting what they had said, splicing video out of context. It wasn't unexpected, but it still hurt. Then came the real blow. A formal statement from HYBE. In perfectly curated legal language, the company announced that Jungkook, Jimin, and Taehyung had violated their ethical and contractual obligations to the company and the global community of ARMY, and were no longer considered official representatives or affiliates of the organization. That wasn't the shock. The shock was the second paragraph. HYBE claimed that the three had been radicalized by foreign parties and were in possession of manipulated and falsified data designed to defame and destabilize a vital cultural institution. It was a calculated move, a narrative of betrayal, national security, a deflection. The government issued a quiet advisory that afternoon. Not quite a warrant, not yet, but a notice, a whisper. They were to be monitored, questioned, possibly detained. "We have to go," Taehyung said, pacing inside the small Airbnb where they had taken refuge. "They're going to arrest us, and if they get us alone, it's over. I'm not running," Jungkook said, sitting on the couch, arms crossed, staring at the blank TV screen like it was a stage he'd never step on again. "Not now." Jimin leaned against the kitchen counter, expression unreadable. "We knew this would happen. We ripped the curtain down, exposed the machine, and now it's trying to put itself back together." Taehyung turned to him. "And what, you're okay with waiting for them to knock the door down?" Jimin met his gaze. "No, I'm okay with finishing this first." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" Jungkook asked. Jimin walked over and opened his laptop. He pulled up a file. It was a clip of the internal AI system again, Project Celestia. But this time, it wasn't a simulation of their faces. It was a prototype file, a new model. A voice began to play, but it wasn't theirs. It was Hoseok's. The algorithm had captured his patterns, the tone, the laughter, the cadences. "He's gone," Jimin said quietly. "I think he didn't make it, or they made sure we'd never find out. But they still had him. They cloned his emotional signature," Taehyung muttered, in horror. "Exactly," Jimin said. "And they were preparing to release him. A digital resurrection, an interactive experience, to pacify the public, to make them forget." Jungkook stood slowly. "Then we destroy it." "How?" Taehyung asked. "It's buried in HYBE's mainframe. We can't even access it without help," Jimin finished. From inside, a long silence. Then Jungkook said, "Namjoon." They hadn't spoken since the escape. Jimin didn't even know if he was still alive. The last anyone had heard, HYBE's boardroom had been scrubbed, replaced. Namjoon's name had quietly disappeared from the leadership pages. He wasn't listed as missing. He wasn't listed as anything. "Even if he's alive," Taehyung said. "Why would he help us?" "Because he loved Hoseok," Jimin said. "And because he tried to stop this before. He just didn't go far enough." They began tracking down his old contacts. A former assistant, a retired security officer, a journalist he once trusted. Piece by piece, they built a trail that led not to Seoul, but Jeju. 3 days later, they arrived at a coastal temple tucked between two cliffs. It was early morning. Mist hung low over the stones, and there, seated in silence before a flickering row of candles, was Namjoon. He didn't look surprised to see them. "Jungkook," he said first, softly. "I saw your face again. I remembered everything." Jungkook didn't move. Jimin stepped forward. "We need your help." Namjoon looked tired. "You don't understand. I tried to change the system from within, but it's not a system. It's a religion, a belief. You can't rewrite faith. You can only break it." "Then help us break it," Taehyung said. Namjoon turned to him. "At what cost?" "Everything," Jimin said. "Because if we don't stop them, we lose more than music. We lose ourselves." Namjoon was silent for a long time. Then he stood. He walked to a cabinet in the back of the room, pulled out a small black box. "This is the kill key," he said. "It's what I built into the system when I realized what it was becoming. A code, a signature loop that would corrupt the AI root if triggered manually. But it can only be executed from inside HYBE's core server." Jungkook took it from his hands. Then we go back. They'll never let you near it, Namjoon said. They'll be waiting, Jimin smiled. For the first time in days. Then we don't go through the front door. They return to Seoul under fake names, underground, invisible, but their presence was already felt. Support began to rise slowly at first. Then, with a force they didn't expect, former trainees, ghostwriters, backup dancers, makeup artists, people who had seen things, known things, felt things, but had never had the courage to speak. Now they did. A movement began. Real idols. Unscripted truth. Let them be human. The company panicked. They issued new statements. Fake apologies. Announcements of internal reform. But the three of them knew the truth. It would not end until the machine itself was brought to its knees. They planned the infiltration down to the second. Yoongi returned for the final phase, operating from a nearby server hub. Namjoon would guide them through the internal architecture. Jungkook, Jimin, and Taehyung would go in, using a forgotten access point through the sub-basement maintenance shaft, the same place they had first auditioned a lifetime ago. And there, in the dark, beneath the stage that had once made them gods, they would bring the system to its knees, already trying. The air beneath the HYBE building was suffocating, dense with old concrete dust and something else, something older, metallic, like the bones of forgotten ambition. The corridor was narrow, its ceiling low. Pipes ran overhead like arteries, humming faintly. Every sound echoed louder down here. The sound of each footstep felt like it could expose them. Jungkook led, crouched, and quiet. His body trained by years of performance but now repurposed for survival. Behind him, Taehyung followed, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder, the kill key secured inside a padded case. Jimin took the rear, eyes sharp, hand hovering near the switchblade hidden inside his sleeve. None of them had spoken since they entered the shaft. The hatch they'd used was an old utility entrance near the back of the HYBE auditorium, the very room where their journey had started. Years ago, they had waited backstage there, breathless, just boys in cheap sneakers, whispering encouragement before their first live performance. Now they returned, not to perform, but to dismantle the empire that had grown from that moment. They reached a door, heavy, reinforced. Taehyung pressed a small transmitter against the lock. A low buzz. Click. The door opened into black. Jungkook exhaled. We're in. The server room was nothing like the rest of the building. Cold, industrial, lifeless. The walls were lined with black towers blinking in sync, like mechanical lungs. Digital veins connected them all, fiber optic cables snaking across the ceiling and disappearing into the walls. The hum of data was deafening. This is it, Jimin said. The core nodes to the left, Taehyung pointed. Yoongi mapped it. They moved quickly. Every second they remained inside, the chances of detection increased. Jungkook's hands were sweating as he pulled the kill key from the case and approached the main terminal. This is encrypted, he muttered, eyes scanning the touchpad. They changed the interface. I got it, Jimin said, stepping in. His fingers flew across the touchscreen. You can't hack this, Taehyung warned. It's not just about access. If we input anything wrong, I'm not hacking, Jimin interrupted. I'm remembering. The screen blinked once, then twice. Access. Granted. They all froze. How the hell did you? Jungkook started. Jimin didn't answer right away. Then he looked at them and said quietly, because the password was the date I tried to walk away. Taehyung's expression changed. He remembered the moment clearly now. Jimin had disappeared for a week, back in 2021. Everyone had thought it was exhaustion, mental health, a scheduled break. But it hadn't been. It had been him trying to leave, trying to escape before they pulled him even deeper. He had come back, quiet, smiling, carrying gifts for the staff, telling jokes, the perfect mask. But now, they knew. The system flickered to life. Streams of data spilled across the screen. Jimin stepped aside, and Jungkook inserted the kill key. Final step, he said. Then came the voice. You don't want to do that. It wasn't a recording. It was live. A new monitor lit up behind them. And there he was, Bang Si-hyu, alone, calm, seated in a sleek office, lit with the same soft blue lights used in training rooms. I was wondering when you'd finally come home, he said. They didn't speak. Bang leaned forward. I admire the performance, he continued. The live stream, the backlash, the chaos. Really brilliant. But you don't understand what you're touching. Celestia isn't a tool anymore. It's a network, a culture. It's already embedded in devices across Asia, in music streaming, in recommendation engines, in emotional guidance apps. You turned our pain into an operating system, Jungkook said, voice raw. I turned your story into something sustainable, Bang corrected. You think fame is given? That it just happens? No. It's built, measured, repeated. Your tears, your smiles, your brotherhood. I captured it, bottled it. Now it heals people, guides them, makes them feel. At the cost of our humanity, Jimin said. And what did your humanity ever give you? Bang asked. Loneliness? Burnout? Depression? You came to me begging for structure, for meaning. I gave you the world. You gave us a cage, Taehyung replied. Bang exhaled, slowly. And yet, even now, I'm offering you a way out. Don't press that key. I'll clear your names, unfreeze your accounts. You'll walk free. You can even go solo again, under new branding. No more tours. No more expectations. Just comfort, peace. And Hoseok? Jimin asked coldly. Will you resurrect him too? Will he be your next product launch? Bang smiled faintly. He was always the most marketable. Jungkook's hands clenched around the key. You're a monster, he said. No, Bang said, leaning back. I'm just a mirror. I showed the world what they wanted, and they paid for it, handsomely. Jimin turned to Jungkook. Do it. Bang's eyes narrowed. You do this, and the whole system collapses. Celestia dies. The records, the digital fan vaults, the archives, all gone. Every version of your legacy erased. Your names will disappear. You'll become whispers, shadows. Jungkook looked at him, then at Taehyung, then at Jimin, and finally, he whispered, Good. He pressed the key, a low chime. Then the screens began to blink, first one, then another. Data corrupted, processes interrupted, systems shutting down. Bang's expression didn't change. But behind him, the light flickered. You just ended your own myth, he said. No, Jimin replied. We ended yours. The terminal erupted in static. They ran. As the server room began to whine like a creature dying, circuits frying from the inside, they sprinted back through the tunnels, barely ahead of the security lockdown. Metal doors slammed shut behind them. The power surged. Lights popped overhead. By the time they reached the surface, alarms had begun to scream. Outside, the sky had opened up again, but this time, the rain felt different, like it wasn't washing away their past, but blessing their rebirth. Yoongi was waiting in a black car across the street. He drove without a word. No music, just the sound of tires slicing through wet streets. Back at the safe house, they waited. 1 hour. 2. Then came the first wave. Media servers crashed. Fan platforms went dark. Thousands of AI-generated posts vanished. Streaming sites displayed content corrupted. Hashtags began trending. System failure. Celestia collapse. And then the final one. They were human. The reaction was nuclear. Some mourned. Some raged. Some denied. But the truth had already carved itself into the internet's memory. The archives were gone. The company released a final statement the next day, a boilerplate apology filled with blame shifting and corporate jargon. But the world didn't care. They were listening to them now. Jungkook, Jimin, Taehyung, real, flawed, free. For the first time in years, there was no concert, no schedule, no camera, just mourning, and the weight of finally breathing in a world that no longer owned them. The aftermath did not feel like victory. It felt like silence. Heavy, unrelenting, suffocating silence. 3 days had passed since they destroyed Celestia. 3 days since the servers went down. Since the system collapsed in on itself, taking with it years of archives, virtual models, algorithms, and $1 billion lie. The internet didn't stop buzzing, but the core storm had passed. And now, the three of them, Jungkook, Jimin, and Taehyung, were left in a kind of limbo. Not fugitives anymore. Not idols. Note, gods. Just men. They had returned to the one place they thought they'd never see again. An old dorm on the outskirts of Seoul. It had been shut down for years, but Namjoon had somehow retained access. It was dusty, the wallpaper peeling, the wooden floor warped from time and memory. But it was theirs. Jungkook sat in the center of the old living room, legs crossed, a bottle of soju half-finished beside him. His eyes were glazed, not with drunkenness, but with exhaustion. Mental, emocional, espiritual. This place smells the same, he muttered. Like ramen and heartbreak. Taehyung answered from the kitchen, stirring instant noodles on a cracked stove. Jimin was outside, sitting on the fire escape. Smoke curled from his cigarette as he stared at the skyline. The city was different now. The industry was different. He didn't know if they had truly won, or if they'd just traded one illusion for another. He spoke without looking back. We should talk about what happens next. Inside, the silence returned. What is there to talk about? Jungkook finally asked. We're done. No label, no contracts, no platform. Exactly, Jimin said. So what now? We can't stay ghosts forever. Taehyung leaned against the doorframe, bowl in one hand. We could disappear for real. Leave Korea. Change our names. Start new lives. And do what? Jungkook asked. Work at a cafe in Prague? Start a farm in Australia? I'm serious. So am I. Jimin turned, eyes tired but sharp. Running is still a reaction. We need a decision. Jungkook stood abruptly. Okay, here's a decision. We tell the truth again. This time, all of it. We already told them the truth, Taehyung said. No, Jungkook said, pacing now. We told them the truth about HYBE, about Celestia, about the system, but we didn't tell them about us, about the things we did to survive, the lines we crossed, the lies we told, the times we looked away because it was easier. Jimin's expression hardened. Are you trying to martyr yourself? No, Jungkook said. I'm trying to finally be real. You want to know what happens next? That. We go live again. No script, no filter. Just us, talking. They'll eat us alive. Maybe, Jungkook said. But maybe they'll finally see us. Taehyung sat down, his appetite suddenly gone. You think they care? The fans? The media? You think they want real people? No. They want to believe in perfect love, perfect pain, perfect redemption. I don't care anymore, Jungkook said. I'm done trying to fit into someone else's fantasy. Jimin looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, Okay, let's do it. But not for them. For us. That night, they set up one final stream. No graphics, no background music. Just a single camera and the three of them sitting in front of it, legs crossed, no makeup, dark circles under their eyes, their souls laid bare. Jungkook spoke first. I want to talk about the things I didn't say last time. About the time I considered ending everything after a show in Osaka. About how I would stand in front of thousands of people and feel nothing. About how I smiled because I was afraid what would happen if I didn't. He paused. No one interrupted. I want to talk about how I lied during interviews. How I laughed when I was breaking. How I let the company erase my grief because it wasn't marketable. His voice cracked. And how I hated myself for it. Jimin took over. I want to talk about the sacrifices I made in silence. The relationships I ended. The family I pushed away. The moments I let them turn me into a product because I didn't think I was worthy of being a person. He swallowed hard. I want to talk about the guilt. About how I saw things happening to others. Trainees, dancers, staff. And stayed quiet. Because I thought if I said something, I'd lose everything. And I did nothing. I was complicit. Taehyung looked straight at the camera. I want to talk about anger. About how I resented both of them. About how I almost left the group in 2018. About how I drank too much, said too little, and convinced myself I didn't care. But I did. He looked down. I want to talk about how much I still care. And how scared that makes me. There was no audience. No applause. Just them. Three young men who had become symbols, reduced to projections, now trying desperately to become human again. After the stream, they didn't check the comments, didn't open social media, didn't look for validation. They sat in the silence and cried. The next morning, they awoke to the sound of knocking. Jimin opened the door and nearly staggered. Standing there, hair disheveled, eyes sunken, clothes soaked from rain, was Hoseok. Alive. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at them, breathing heavy. Then he smiled. "Took you long enough," he said. Jungkook pulled him into a hug so hard it knocked both of them back. Taehyung was already crying. Jimin was frozen. Hoseok let it happen. Silent tears running down his face, his body trembling. "I thought you were dead," Jimin finally whispered. "I almost was," Hoseok said. "They held me. For weeks. Somewhere off-grid. I escaped through a drain tunnel. Why didn't you contact us?" Jungkook asked. "They were watching everything," Hoseok said. "I needed to wait. Needed to be sure." "Yoongi said you were gone," Taehyung said. Hoseok looked at them. "He thought I was. That was the point. I had to disappear. But now," he stepped inside, dripping water on the floor. "Now I'm ready." "Ready for what?" Jimin asked. Hoseok smiled faintly. "To rebuild." That evening, they met with Yoongi and Namjoon one final time. All 5 of them. No cameras, no press. Just a round table in a dimly lit cafe Yoongi had once written lyrics in. Yoongi laid it out first. "The system's dead, but the void it left will attract something else. New money, new puppeteers. The public will move on, unless you give them something better to believe in." Jimin asked the question they'd all been circling. "So what do we do?" Namjoon looked at them, the candlelight flickering in his eyes. "You create something new. A collective, not a company, not an idol factory. Something real, built on truth. Artists, producers, storytellers. A movement." Taehyung frowned. "No one will trust us." "Then earn it," Yoongi said, "brick by brick." Hoseok nodded. "We don't call it redemption. We don't beg for forgiveness. We just start. Quiet. Honest. Real." Jungkook leaned back. "I don't even know if I still believe in music." "You don't have to," Namjoon said. "Just believe in us." They looked around the table, each face scarred, each heart heavy. But for the first time in years, each soul awake. And in that quiet corner of a city that had once raised them and tried to consume them, 5 men made a promise. Not to rise again, but to become not idols, not heroes, just men. With voices, with wounds, with truth. The studio was nothing more than an empty warehouse in Incheon, once used for underground hip-hop shows and now reclaimed by 5 ghosts learning how to live again. There was no soundproofing, no LED lights. Just exposed concrete, tangled wires, old equipment stacked in corners, and a single piano in the middle of the room. The windows had no curtains. The floors bore the dust of decades. But for the first time in what felt like forever, it felt real. It felt right. Jimin stood near the piano, fingers running absent-mindedly over the chipped keys. He wasn't playing. Not yet. He was just touching, feeling, testing. After years of pretending, performing, and posing, there was a strange terror in being allowed to feel the weight of silence. Behind him, Jungkook paced like a caged animal, trying to remember how to breathe in open space. His hair was longer now, his face leaner. There was no makeup to soften the pain around his eyes. No brand behind him to polish the edges. He had become unedited. Taehyung sat on the floor, scribbling lyrics into a weathered notebook, his guitar leaning against his shoulder. Hoseok was adjusting the old soundboard, tapping cables with a calm that only comes from someone who's known the edge of death and come back with nothing left to lose. And Yoongi, quiet, precise, stood behind an old laptop screen, his hands dancing over the keys as he set up a basic track. Namjoon hadn't arrived yet. The new project had no name. They refused to call it a comeback. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even protest anymore. It was witness. The idea was simple, dangerous, necessary. 5 tracks, 5 voices, 5 truths, raw, unfiltered, each one written by the member who lived it. No label, no marketing campaign, no pre-orders. Just 5 files released into the wild like confessions, shouted into the ocean. They would record here, live, 1 take each, no retakes, no pitch correction. If their voices cracked, so be it. If they cried, so be it. If they broke in the middle of a line, that too would stay. Jungkook finally stopped pacing. He turned to Jimin. I don't know if I can do this. Jimin looked up from the piano, brow furrowed. You're the one who said this was the only way. I know, Jungkook said. But that was when it was theoretical. That was when I still thought there'd be a structure, a safety net, something. There's never been a safety net, Yoongi muttered from the back. Taehyung looked up from his notebook. You said you wanted them to see you. I do, Jungkook said. But what if they don't like what they see? There was a pause. Hoseok didn't look up from the soundboard. Then at least you were honest, he said. Jimin stood and crossed the room. He placed a hand on Jungkook's shoulder. No more masks, he said. No more choreography to hide behind. No more tears rehearsed in mirror rooms. Just us. If we fall apart, we fall together. No one's leaving this time. Jungkook closed his eyes. He nodded. Okay. The room shifted into motion. Yoongi pulled up the first session file. Hoseok positioned the mic. Taehyung muted his guitar and adjusted the tuning pegs. Jimin sat down on the piano bench again. The air felt electric, heavy, like something spiritual was about to break open. They started with Jungkook. His track was titled Golden, but hollow. It was slow, sparse. A bare acoustic guitar and a single synth layer, nothing else. He stood in front of the mic, headphones on, eyes closed, and when he began to sing, it wasn't a performance. It was a confession. I smiled for millions, but never once for me. I danced like a god just to feel like debris. His voice cracked midway through the second verse. He kept going. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't stop. Not this time. The chorus was nothing more than a breath and a question. Would you still love me if I forgot how to shine? When it ended, no one clapped. No one spoke. They let the silence do what applause never could. Next was Jimin. His track was titled Paper Saints. It started with an old voicemail, his mother's voice, asking if he was eating, if he was sleeping, if he was okay. Then the beat dropped just a soft piano loop, and the echo of his own voice layered over itself like thoughts that wouldn't shut up. I was your comfort, your soft boy, your healer. But who stitched me when I bled in hotel showers? He didn't sing the chorus. He whispered it. I became the bandage, but I was never the wound. His voice faded out slowly, replaced by the sounds of an old rehearsal room, his laughter, faint cheering, a memory captured in lo-fi and looped like a ghost. Taehyung followed. His track was titled Winter 2018. Just one guitar. Nothing else. He sat on the floor as he played. The microphone picked up everything, the slide of his fingers, the creak of the wood, the breath before each word. His lyrics were strange, poetic, like diary pages rewritten as riddles. Called myself a shadow, but I wanted to be seen. Said I didn't care, but I memorized every scream. He didn't cry. He didn't even look up. But the last line was a dagger. Maybe I wore the mask so long, it grew skin. Then came Hoseok. His track was called Quiet Exit. It began with silence. Then a single heartbeat. Then his voice, barely above a murmur. I left without saying goodbye. Not because I wanted to, but because goodbye felt like a lie. There was no beat. Just his voice and a distant field recording of city traffic. As if he was walking through the noise, invisible, unnoticed. He spoke more than he sang. There's a version of me locked in a server somewhere, smiling on command, crying on cue, living a life I never chose, while I was locked in a basement, wondering if anyone would know, if I disappeared for real. He ended with a breath and a whisper. But I came back. Young didn't record a song. He recorded silence. His track, titled Echo Chamber, was just 4 minutes and 33 seconds of quiet studio ambience, chairs shifting, someone breathing, the hum of the old laptop, a distant car horn. It was a tribute to everything they had lost, to what they had survived. Finally, Namjoon arrived. He didn't speak at first, just listened. Then he wrote a poem on the wall, not on paper, on the wall. He took a permanent marker and scribbled, line by line. I built a tower of mirrors and called it love. Watched boys drown in reflections, called them legends. Watched them burn and called it fate. But now, there's only dust and 5 names still standing in the ash. He set the marker down, and they sat together in the center of the room. No cameras, no social media, No label execs. Just men. Scarred. Still healing. Still choosing to show up. A week later, they released the 5 tracks unannounced. No label, no streaming platform. Just a single link shared on a private server. It spread like wildfire. Fans around the world cried, wrote essays, created tributes. Some turned away. Some clung harder. But the silence they'd once been buried under was gone. Forever. For the first time, their music wasn't charting. It was changing something. There were no fan chants, just truth. And in that truth, they found something even louder than applause. They found peace. Not the peace that comes from comfort, but the peace that comes from standing on your own grave and realizing you're still alive, still breathing, still here. End of episode 10.